She left her husband with nothing but her daughter, a half-tank of gas, and a promise never to go back. 3 months later, broke, homeless, and haunted by debt, she broke into an abandoned house to escape the rain and found something that would change everything she believed about miracles.
Hello, if you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and tap the notification bell. Type in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as touching as this one, or maybe even crazier. And you don't want to miss it. Now let's begin.
She left her husband with nothing but her daughter, a half-tank of gas, and a promise never to go back. 3 months later, broke, homeless, and buried under $90,000 of debt, Lydia Merrick drove through a rainstorm thick enough to erase the road ahead, and perhaps, she thought, the past behind. Water streaked across the windshield, distorting the empty gas station lights into trembling halos. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles pale against the dark. The heater hadn't worked in weeks. From the back seat came the soft sound of breathing, her daughter, Junie, asleep under a blanket patterned with faded stars. The wipers squeaked, protesting every pass. Lydia's reflection flickered on the glass, hollow-eyed and exhausted. She used to think survival meant endurance, but now she knew it meant pretending she wasn't scared. The phone on the passenger seat buzzed once. Unknown number. She didn't need to answer to know who it was. She turned it over, screen down, and whispered, "Not tonight." The rain fell harder, blurring the world into streaks of gray. She pulled into the cracked lot of an old shopping center and killed the engine. Silence pressed in. She could smell damp upholstery, the faint trace of lavender shampoo in Junie's hair, and the metallic tang of fear she never quite shook off. Junie stirred. "Mom, are we home?" Lydia swallowed. "Not yet, baby. Soon." She lied softly, the way you lie when you want to keep hope alive. Lightning flared. In the flash, she saw it. An old house half hidden beyond the parking lot, its roof sagging under vines, windows boarded up like eyes refusing to look at the world. She hesitated. It looked dangerous, but the storm was relentless. She started the car again. The tires sloshed through puddles as she drove up the cracked driveway, past a mailbox leaning sideways under the name Chandler. The headlights caught peeling white paint, a broken porch, and weeds tall enough to hide secrets. Lydia parked behind the house and shut off the engine. "Stay close to me," she told Junie as they ran through the rain. The door gave way under her shoulder with a splintering groan. Inside, it smelled of dust, mold, and time left too long alone. The wallpaper peeled like old bandages. Junie clung to her sleeve as thunder rolled overhead. They found the living room first, a couch covered in plastic, a fireplace choked with ash. Lydia set their bags down near the hearth. The ceiling dripped faintly in the corner, but it was dry enough to rest. "Mom," said Junie, voice small, "is it okay to be here?" Lydia looked around. "It's just for tonight." She used her flashlight to scan the walls. There were photographs still hanging, faces faded, a family she'd never know. For a moment she wondered what became of them. Later, after Junie had fallen asleep wrapped in her coat, Lydia sat awake listening to the rain drum against the windows. Her thoughts drifted to her ex-husband, his voice, his temper, the way he could smile while breaking her down piece by piece. She had survived him, but survival came with scars. A sudden sound broke through her memory, a hollow thud, like something shifting beneath the floorboards. She froze. Another creak followed, softer this time from the direction of the hallway. She took her flashlight and followed the noise, her pulse quickening. The beam landed on a door at the end of the hall, half open, leading to the basement. "Probably rats," she whispered to herself. Still, she descended. The basement smelled of rust and damp earth. Cobwebs hung like lace from the beams. As she swept the light across the floor, something metallic caught her eye. Just a faint glimmer near the back wall. She crouched. Beneath a thin layer of dirt and debris, a small metal object jutted out. It looked like a pendant, its chain broken, its surface tarnished but not destroyed. In its center was an engraving, an unfamiliar crest, and the initials E.R.C. Lydia turned it in her hand, feeling the cold weight of it. It wasn't money, but it was something people hide when it matters. She pocketed it without thinking. When she returned upstairs, Junie was awake, watching her. What was down there? Nothing important, but her voice trembled just enough for Junie to notice.
The morning came gray and quiet. Rainwater dripped from the eaves outside, tapping against the broken glass of the windows like a patient knock. Lydia sat by the cold fireplace, staring at the pendant in her hand. In the daylight, it looked older than she first thought. Silver dulled to pewter, the engraving deep and elegant, like something made decades ago. The initials ERC shimmered faintly when the light hit them just right. Junie stirred from sleep, rubbing her eyes. "Mom, what's that?" Lydia hesitated. Just something I found last night. Does it belong to the people who used to live here?" "Maybe," Lydia said softly, "but I think whoever they were, they've been gone a long time." They shared half a granola bar for breakfast. The house creaked around them, its silence too large for two people. Lydia could feel the pull of the pendant in her pocket, like it wanted to be found or remembered. Later that day, she decided to explore more of the house, looking for anything useful. She found a few blankets, a stack of yellowed newspapers, and an old trunk filled with photographs. Faces smiled up at her from another lifetime. A man in a wool suit, a woman with kind eyes, a little boy holding a kite. In the corner of one photo, nearly faded to nothing, were those same initials, ERC. Lydia frowned. "Who were you?" she whispered. She didn't hear the creak of the front porch until Junie screamed, "Mom, someone's outside!" Lydia rushed to the window. A truck had pulled into the drive, a red pickup, dented and muddy. Her breath caught in her throat. For a split second, she thought it was him. Her ex-husband had a truck just like that. She grabbed Junie and pulled her close. But when the driver's door opened, it wasn't him. A man stepped out. Older, maybe mid-50s, with gray at his temples and a heavy coat against the chill. He carried a toolbox and moved with a cautious gait. When he noticed the open front door, he froze. Lydia's heart pounded. If he called the police, she'd lose everything. He cupped his hands to his mouth. "Hello? Is someone in there?" Lydia pressed her finger to her lips and whispered to Junie, "Stay here." She stepped into the doorway, shielding her daughter behind her. "I'm sorry, we'll leave right now. We just needed a place to stay out of the rain." The man raised his palms. "It's okay. I'm not here to chase you off." His voice was calm, measured, not like the ones she'd learned to fear. He extended a cautious smile. "My name's Elliot Carter." The pendant burned cold in Lydia's pocket. "Elliot Carter?" she repeated. He nodded. "Yeah, why?" Her breath caught. She took the pendant out slowly, holding it in her palm. "Does this mean anything to you?" When he saw it, the color drained from his face. He took a step forward, eyes wide, voice trembling with disbelief. "Where did you find that?" "In the basement," she said. "It was under the floor." Elliot reached out, his hand hovering over it like he was afraid to touch it. "That belonged to my mother. It went missing the year she died." The air thickened with something fragile and electric, like grief brushing against fate. Lydia didn't know why. She felt what she was standing in the middle of something bigger than luck. Elliot finally met his eyes. "That pendant's been lost for almost 40 years, he said quietly. "I don't know how you found it, but maybe there's a reason." For the first time in months, Lydia didn't feel invisible.
Lydia didn't sleep that night. The pendant sat on the floor beside her, its faint reflection catching the glow from her phone's dying flashlight. She could still hear Elliot's voice echoing in her mind, calm, steady, too gentle to be real. He'd offered them the guest room upstairs, said the roof didn't leak there, said they could have hot coffee in the morning if the power came back on. Lydia thanked him, but insisted on staying downstairs. Too many years had taught her that safety was a fragile thing, and kindness was sometimes a mask before the blow. Junie, though, had liked him. "He looks like Grandpa used to," she whispered, curling up in her blanket. "He talks soft." Lydia nodded, but didn't answer. Trust was a word she no longer believed in. The next morning, the rain had thinned to drizzle. Elliot returned with a paper bag of groceries, Bread, soup cans, instant coffee. Lydia watched from the doorway as he carried them inside. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I guessed. You didn't have to do that, Lydia said warily. I know. He smiled faintly. That's why I did. She didn't smile back. Her body still carried the memory of flinching. Elliot didn't push. He just sat at the table, opened one of the cans, and warmed it over a portable stove he'd brought from his truck. The smell of chicken soup filled the air. Junie's eyes lit up. She hadn't eaten a warm meal in days. Go ahead, Elliot said gently. It's yours. Lydia hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to accept favors, not to owe anyone anything again. But Junie's hunger outweighed her fear. She nodded, murmured a quiet thank you, and took the bowl. They ate in silence for a while. Rain tapped the windows in steady rhythm. Elliot finally spoke. That pendant you found, it meant everything to my mother. She wore it until the day she died. My father couldn't bear to look for it after she passed. Lydia listened. Spoon paused halfway to her lips. I'm sorry, she said. He shrugged lightly. You brought a piece of her back to me. That's not nothing. For a moment, Lydia wanted to believe there were still decent people left in the world. People who didn't take, didn't break, didn't twist kindness into control. But then her phone buzzed again on the counter. The screen flashed with the same numbers she'd ignored before. Her stomach turned. Everything okay? Elliot asked. Yeah, she said too quickly, shoving the phone into her bag. Just spam. But Junie was watching her closely, and Lydia saw the shadow of worry in her daughter's eyes. That night, as Elliot worked on fixing a broken fuse in the hallway, Lydia stood by the window, watching the truck parked outside. Its reflection reminded her too much of the one her ex-husband drove. Same color, same rust along the bumper. The memory came uninvited, the sharp crack of a belt, the slam of a door, and the way he'd whisper apologies between insults. She pressed her hand to the cold glass and whispered, He's gone, Lydia. You're safe now. But the words didn't feel true. When Elliot finished his repairs, he found her standing there. He hesitated, reading the tension in her shoulders. You've got that look, he said quietly, like someone's still chasing you. Lydia turned, startled. I don't talk about it. You don't have to. I've seen that look before. Something in his tone, steady, not pitying, made her chest tighten. He wasn't asking for details. He was just acknowledging the truth that lived behind her silence. I was married. He wasn't kind, she said finally. Elliot nodded once. Then I'm glad you got out. No sermon, no questions, just that. Junie came into the room then, hair messy from sleep. Mom, can we stay here for a while, just until it's sunny again? Lydia wanted to say no, to keep running before kindness turned into another cage. But when she looked at Elliot, standing quietly with his hands in his pockets, she saw nothing but patience. We'll stay for a bit, she said softly, just until we figure things out. Elliot nodded. You're welcome as long as you need. Outside, the clouds began to thin, and faint sunlight bled through the gray. For the first time in a long time, Lydia felt something close to safety. Not peace yet, but the shadow of it waiting at the edges of her fear. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered what other secrets that pendant had been waiting all these years to reveal.
By the end of the week, the storm had passed, but Lydia hadn't yet found the strength to leave. The house, once lifeless, had begun to feel strangely alive again. Elliot fixed the leaks, cleared debris from the porch, and brought light back to rooms that had been dark for decades. Junie filled those rooms with laughter, laughter that Lydia hadn't heard since before everything fell apart. Sometimes Lydia caught herself watching Elliot from a distance, the way he moved carefully, never too close, never too fast. He always announced his steps when he entered a room, always asked before touching anything that belonged to them. It was a kind of gentleness she wasn't used to. Still, she kept her guard. The habit of fear was hard to unlearn. One morning, Junie followed Elliot into the garden behind the house, where wildflowers had started growing through the cracks. Lydia stood at the back door, coffee warming her hands, heart caught between gratitude and wariness. "She's a bright kid," Elliot said, wiping dirt from his hands. "Smart, too. You've done right by her." Lydia smiled faintly. "I'm trying." "You're doing better than trying." He hesitated, then added, "I've seen what happens when people don't get out soon enough." Lydia's chest tightened. "You mean—" He nodded slowly. "My father wasn't a kind man either. That's why I spent most of my life fixing things that couldn't talk back." For a moment, silence sat between them. Not heavy, just honest. Two people who'd been broken in different ways, recognizing the same ache. Lydia turned the pendant over in her palm. "Do you think she'd want you to have this back, your mother?" Elliot looked at it carefully. Maybe she'd want it to go to whoever needed it most. The words lingered in Lydia's mind like a promise she didn't yet understand. That night, Junie fell asleep on the couch while Lydia washed the dishes. Elliot worked quietly at the table, sorting through old letters he'd found in a box in the attic. When she dried her hands and turned around, he was staring at one in particular. Yellowed, the ink almost gone. "What is it?" she asked. He hesitated before handing it to her. "My mother wrote this the week before she died. It mentions that pendant. Says she hid something with it, something important." Lydia read the letter slowly, tracing each faded word. Near the end, one sentence stood out. "If anyone ever finds this, follow the light where it was first lost." She frowned. "What does that even mean?" Elliot exhaled. "I'm not sure, but she was buried at St. Mary's Church, about 15 miles from here. Her grave faces east. The sunrise hits it first." Lydia looked up at him, heart quickening. "You think whatever she hid is there?" "I think," Elliot said softly, "that maybe fate put you here for a reason." Lydia didn't believe in fate, but something in her chest fluttered anyway. A small, trembling thing that felt like hope trying to wake up. She tucked Junie in, sat beside her, and stared at the pendant glowing faintly in the lamplight. The words, "Follow the light where it was first lost," echoed in her mind like a heartbeat. Maybe the fortune wasn't buried in money or gold. Maybe it was buried in truth. If you were in Lydia's place, broke, homeless, and holding something that might lead to a miracle, would you follow the clue or stay safe where you are?
The morning sun crept through the cracked blinds, turning the dust in the air into slow dancing gold. Lydia hadn't slept. The letter's final line kept circling in her mind. "Follow the light where it was first lost." Elliot stood by the window, coffee in hand, the pendant glinting faintly between them on the table. "I haven't been to her grave in years," he said quietly. "After she passed, I couldn't face it. My father blamed me for everything, for her illness, for losing the pendant, for existing, I think." Lydia understood that kind of blame. It was the kind that never really left your skin. "Maybe it's time," she said. He nodded, eyes far away. "Maybe it is." They packed the truck, a blanket, water, a small lunch for Junie, and set out on the narrow road leading out of Ashton Hill. The drive was quiet, the kind of silence that carried both comfort and tension. Junie pressed her face to the window, tracing patterns in the condensation. "Mom," she said softly, "do you think the pendant's magic?" "I don't know about magic, sweetheart, but it feels meant." Elliot glanced at her, his voice barely above the hum of the engine. "Maybe not magic. Maybe memory." When they arrived, St. Mary's Church stood lonely against a backdrop of rolling hills, its white paint weathered, its bell tower leaning slightly to the right. The cemetery stretched behind it, rows of stones softened by moss and years. They found her grave at the far end, half hidden by ivy. Margaret Ruth Carter, 1938 to 1979. The headstone faced east, just as Eliot had said. The morning light spilled across it, illuminating the carved cross at its top. Lydia knelt beside it, brushing dirt from the base. The ground felt oddly hollow beneath her fingers. "There's something here," she murmured. Eliot dropped to one knee, helping her clear the earth. Beneath the soil, they uncovered a small tin box, rusted but intact. Junie gasped. "It's like a treasure." Lydia's heart pounded as Eliot pried it open. Inside lay an old photograph, a folded envelope, and a small brass key. The photograph showed a young woman, Eliot's mother, standing beside a little boy in front of a house Lydia recognized instantly, the same one they were staying in. She inhaled sharply. "That's your old house." Eliot nodded slowly. "And that's me. I must have been 6. He opened the envelope next. Inside was a letter written in the same delicate script as the one they'd found before. "If you're reading this, it means you found your way home. The key opens the chest I left in the basement, the one I couldn't bear to open again after your father changed. Inside is what remains of our family's truth. Don't be afraid to face it." Lydia and Eliot exchanged a look, part awe, part fear. Junie whispered, "What does it mean?" Eliot said quietly, "It means we need to go back." They drove home in silence. Lydia watched the trees blur past the window, thinking about the word truth. What truth could a dying mother have hidden? When they returned to the house, the air felt different, heavier, as if the walls themselves were waiting. Eliot led the way down to the basement. The single bulb overhead flickered, casting their shadows across the concrete floor. There, against the far wall, half buried behind old crates, was a small wooden chest with an iron latch. Eliot fit the brass key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. Inside lay a stack of documents, several photographs, and another pendant, identical to the one Lydia had found, but newer, untouched by time. Eliot picked up the papers, eyes widening as he read. These are property deeds. My mother bought land in town before she died. It's still in her name." Lydia frowned. "But why hide it?" He stared at the papers for a long time before whispering, "Because my father would have taken it from her, just like he took everything else." Lydia's heart clenched. She understood that kind of man, the kind who erased everything he couldn't control. Junie pointed to a name at the bottom of the page. "What's that say, Mom?" Lydia squinted. "The lands deeded to Carter and Marek Foundation." She froze. Marek, her last name. Eliot's eyes met hers, confusion giving way to realization. "Your husband's family?" Lydia shook her head slowly. "No, my mother's. I never knew much about her side. She left when I was little." Eliot whispered, "Then this was meant for you." The pendant, the letters, the buried box, all of it was part of something larger. Two families intertwined by history, by pain, and maybe by redemption. Lydia reached for the pendant in her pocket, turning it over once more. For the first time, it didn't feel like a mystery. It felt like an invitation. And above them, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, a reminder that storms always return before the calm. The storm passed again that night, leaving the air cool and heavy with the scent of wet soil. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of an old wall clock and the faint sound of Junie humming upstairs as she drew pictures by candlelight. Lydia and Eliot sat at the kitchen table, the papers from the chest spread out between them. The truth was laid bare now. Two families linked by chance and blood, both scarred by the same kind of cruelty.
Lydia traced her fingers over the names on the deeds. I still don't understand. How could my mother's name be here? She never mentioned anyone named Carter. Elliot leaned back in his chair, eyes thoughtful. Maybe she couldn't. If your mother came from this town, my father would have known her. He wasn't a man who forgave easily. Maybe she ran to protect you. Lydia looked down, a familiar ache tightening her chest. She left me when I was 7. I used to tell myself she'd come back when things got better. Elliot's voice softened. Did she? She shook her head. No, I think she was running too. For a while, neither spoke. The light from the candle flickered between them, casting soft shadows across the table. There was something unspoken in the air. Not attraction yet, but understanding, the kind that feels heavier than words. Junie appeared in the doorway, holding a drawing. Mom, look! Lydia smiled. It was a picture of the house, the same broken old structure they were sitting in. But in Junie's version, it glowed with light from every window. Flowers filled the yard. 3 people stood hand in hand on the porch. Lydia, Junie, and Elliot. That's beautiful, Lydia said, voice trembling. It's our home now. Can we stay here forever? Lydia couldn't answer. Her throat closed around the word forever. Elliot cleared his throat softly. You 2 can stay as long as you need. This house has seen enough ghosts. Maybe it's time for it to see life again. Something in Lydia's chest loosened, a tension she'd carried since the night she left her husband. They spent the next few days repairing what they could. Lydia cleaned the kitchen until it shone, while Elliot patched the roof. Junie followed them around, humming, her laughter echoing through the hallways. The house began to feel alive again, like it was breathing with them. On the 3rd evening, Lydia found Elliot in the garden, watching the sunset. The light painted everything gold, his face, the wildflowers, the air itself. You fixed the fence, she said. He smiled faintly. Couldn't let the wind keep knocking it down. She stood beside him, arms folded against the chill. You do a lot of fixing. He nodded, eyes still on the horizon. Some things are worth mending, even if they don't look at it first. Lydia looked down, trying not to smile. I'm not something you can fix, Elliot. I know, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve to heal. The words hit her deeper than she expected. For years she'd been told she was broken beyond repair, by her ex-husband, by the system, by life itself. But here was someone who didn't try to rewrite her story, just helped her turn the page. Later, after Junie had gone to bed, they sat on the porch, listening to crickets and the low rustle of leaves. Lydia told him about the night she ran, how her husband had thrown her out when she refused to sell the last of her jewelry to pay his debts, how she'd driven for hours, crying so hard she could barely see the road. Elliot listened without interrupting. When she was done, he said only, "You did the bravest thing a person can do. You left." Lydia turned her face away, tears gathering in her eyes. "Sometimes I wonder if I did it too late." He shook his head. "You did it the moment you could. That's enough." They sat in silence for a long time. Somewhere in the house, the clock chimed 9 times. Junie's drawing sat on the windowsill behind them, fluttering in the soft breeze, a reminder of what might still be possible. And for the first time in years, Lydia allowed herself to imagine a life not defined by running, but by staying.
It happened on a Friday afternoon. The air felt different that day, thick, unsettled, like the calm before a storm. Lydia was folding Junie's clothes in the living room, while Elliot fixed a loose step on the porch. The house had grown warm with life, with laughter. For a few precious days, peace had seemed possible. Then a truck pulled into the drive, a rusted blue pickup, engine coughing smoke. The sight of it sent a cold shiver through Lydia's chest. She didn't need to see the man step out to know who it was. She recognized the slam of the door, the scrape of his boots on gravel, sounds she had once lived by. "Lydia?" The voice tore through the quiet like glass shattering. "You think you can run forever?" Junie froze on the staircase, eyes wide. Elliot stepped between them in the doorway before Lydia could move. "Who are you?" Elliot asked, voice steady. "Her husband, or at least I was before she decided she's better than the man who fed her." "You didn't feed us," Lydia said, her voice trembling but firm. "You drained us. I'm not coming back." He laughed, a sound without warmth. "You think you can hide in some broken-down house with a stranger? I know what you're up to. You found something, didn't you? The money, the deed?" Elliot stepped forward, shoulders squared. "You need to leave." His expression darkened. "You don't tell me what to do and what's mine." "It isn't yours," Livia said. "Not anymore." He lunged toward her. Elliot moved faster, catching his arm mid-swing. For a moment, the two men struggled, the weight of years of anger, fear, and exhaustion hanging between them. Then Junie screamed and the sound cut through everything. Elliot pushed him back, hard enough that the man stumbled into the doorframe. "Get out," Elliot said again, voice low, trembling not with fear but control. The man spat at the floor. "You think this is over? You don't know what you're holding, Lydia. That house, your name, it all leads back to money you'll never keep." He turned and left, slamming the truck door so hard it rattled the windows. Gravel scattered behind him as the truck roared away down the dirt road. When the sound faded, silence rushed in like a flood. Lydia sank onto the couch, shaking. Elliot crouched beside her, his hand hovering before finally resting on hers. "You're safe. He's gone." But she wasn't sure. Her past had found her once. It could find her again. That night, after Junie had cried herself to sleep, Lydia and Elliot sat on the porch in silence. The crickets were loud again, the stars too bright. "I didn't mean for you to get dragged into this," Lydia whispered. Elliot shook his head. "You didn't drag me. I stayed." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "You should have let me handle it." "I don't think you've had to handle anything alone for too long. Maybe it's time someone stood with you." Lydia wanted to believe that, but she also knew what men like her ex-husband could do. They didn't stop when told. They waited for weakness. They came back. The next morning, she found Elliot in the basement, staring at the papers from the chest. He looked different, distant, as if he'd been awake all night. "What is it?" she asked. He hesitated, then held up one of the documents. "He was right. I checked the town records online. There's money tied to the land, a trust fund my mother created. It's worth a lot." Lydia's stomach dropped. "How much?" "Close to $2 million, Elliot said quietly. "But there's a catch. It's registered under both our family names, Carter and Merrick. If you claim it, your ex will know. He'll have legal grounds to contest it." Lydia stared at the papers, her heart pounding. Freedom, safety, a future for Junie, all just within reach. But claiming it meant reopening the door she just slammed shut. "What if we don't claim it?" she whispered. Elliot looked at her. "Then the land stays buried, and everything your mother, my mother, tried to protect dies with it." She turned away, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I can't lose her again. Not after all this." Elliot's voice cracked. "And I can't lose you now." That broke something inside her, not in anger, but in grief, in longing. Because for once, she wanted to stay. She wanted to believe in something that didn't end in leaving. But hope, she knew, always came with a cost. If you were Lydia, holding the key to a fortune that could save your family, but might destroy your peace, what would you do? Comment below. Would you claim it, or walk away to protect the life you've rebuilt?
The house was silent the next morning. Elliot was gone when Lydia woke. No note, no sound, just the echo of absence. The space he'd filled so easily now felt hollow. She sat at the table, the papers from the chest spread out before her, the pendant resting beside them. Junie patted in quietly, her small hand finding her mother's. "Is he coming back?" Lydia didn't know. "Maybe," she said softly. "Sometimes people leave to think." She tried to sound sure, but her voice cracked on the last word. Outside, the world was waking. The fields shimmered under the rising sun, and the sound of distant church bells carried through the air, the same bells that had rung when they found the grave. Lydia wondered if it meant something or if the universe was simply reminding her that time didn't wait for the broken to catch up. She looked down at the documents again. 2 names, 2 families, 1 future. Her mother's handwriting echoed in her mind. Don't be afraid to face it. By afternoon, Lydia packed a small bag and drove into town. She stopped in front of the county courthouse, a red brick building with steps that looked too tall for her tired legs. Junie clutched her hand tightly. "Mom, if we get the money, can we fix the house?" Lydia smiled faintly. "If we get the money, maybe we can fix more than that." Inside, the clerk looked over the papers and frowned. "It's complicated," he said, flipping through them. "These are old trusts, shared ownership. If both heirs aren't present, nothing moves forward." Lydia's heart sank. Both heirs? Carter and Merrick. Both names must sign. She thanked him and left, her chest tight. The air outside was thick with heat and the smell of rain coming again. She drove aimlessly for an hour, the roads winding through memories she didn't want to face. Nights of shouting, slammed doors, broken promises. Every turn seemed to lead her back to the same thought. Maybe she wasn't meant to be saved. Maybe some people just survive. But then she remembered Elliot's words. Some things are worth mending, even if they don't look it at first. When she reached the house, the porch light was on. Elliot was sitting there, head bowed, hands clasped. "I didn't know if you'd come back," he said quietly as she stepped out of the car. "I didn't know either," she admitted. He looked up at her, eyes red but steady. "I went into town this morning, checked the accounts again. You were right. Claiming it would make you a target. Your ex's lawyer already filed an inquiry." Lydia's chest tightened. "So it's over?" He shook his head. "Not if we do it differently." He handed her a new document, something freshly printed. "I had the deeds redrafted. I added Junie's name. We can transfer ownership to her now as a beneficiary. Your ex can't touch it. Neither can I." Lydia stared at the paper, heart pounding. "You'd give it up?" "I'm not giving it up," Elliot said softly. "I'm giving it purpose. That land, that money, it's blood money. Pain, turned to value. Maybe it's meant to build something better." Tears stung her eyes. "Why would you do this for us?" He smiled faintly. "Because you reminded me what family used to mean before it broke." For a long time she couldn't speak. The air between them was heavy with everything they hadn't said. Gratitude, sorrow, something that felt like love but was still too fragile to name. Lydia finally whispered, "You could have walked away." "I almost did," he admitted. "But every time I thought about leaving, I heard Junie laughing. And I remembered the sound of your voice the night you found that pendant, the way you said, 'It feels mint.'" A tear slipped down Lydia's cheek. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "It does." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of all the things they'd both lost and the one thing they'd finally found. They stood like that until the light faded, until the crickets started their song again. Later, after Junie had fallen asleep, Lydia sat on the porch with the pendant in her hands. She whispered a quiet prayer, not for wealth, not for safety, but for strength to keep choosing hope, even when it hurt. If you were Lydia, standing at the edge of a new beginning, torn between fear and faith, would you take the risk and trust again?
Morning came quietly, the kind of morning that didn't rush, where the light moved slow, patient, deliberate. Lydia stood by the kitchen window, watching Junie chase sunlight across the floor. The laughter that filled the house now didn't echo like it used to. It belonged here. It was home. The papers were signed. The land and trust were no longer symbols of fear or loss. They were the beginning of something new.
Lydia and Elliot had taken the documents to the courthouse together the day before, hands brushing as they placed the last signatures down. When they walked out, the air had smelled like rain and fresh earth, like clean beginnings. Now the property belonged to Junie, but more than that, it belonged to Hope. Elliot entered the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "The inspector's coming today," he said, "to check the foundation before we start rebuilding." Lydia smiled. "Rebuilding," she repeated, testing the word. "Feels strange saying that out loud." He grinned. "Strange can be good." They drank their coffee in quiet companionship. No tension, no shadows, just a steady peace that came after surviving the storm. In the afternoon, they drove out to the edge of the property, acres of wild grass and sunlight where the Carter family's old farm had once stood. It was overgrown and untamed, but beautiful in its own way. "This is where it starts," Elliot said. "We could plant something here. Maybe a shelter, a place for people who've lost their way." Lydia turned to him. "You mean for people like us?" He nodded. "Exactly like us." Junie ran ahead, her arms spread wide, spinning in the tall grass. "It's like the world's starting over," she shouted. Lydia laughed, tears blurring her vision. "It feels like it, doesn't it?" They stayed there for a while, the 3 of them, standing where 2 broken families once ended, and one new one quietly began. That night, after Junie fell asleep, Lydia and Elliot sat by the porch again, looking out at the moonlit yard. The pendant hung from Lydia's neck now, the twin of Elliot's mother's resting around his. The pendants caught the light together, reflecting faint gold. Elliot glanced at her. "You ever think your mom knew this would happen?" Lydia smiled softly. "I think she hoped it would. That's all anyone can do, really. Hope that the people we love find the light we couldn't reach ourselves." He nodded. "Then maybe that's what redemption really is. Not undoing what's broken, but planting something beautiful where it cracked." Lydia looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Elliot, thank you." He smiled. "For what?" "For staying." The words carried more weight than he could answer. Instead, he reached for her hand. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, just gentle, honest, real. The kind of touch that said, "We made it." The wind picked up, soft and cool. The trees rustled like a sigh. Somewhere inside, Junie stirred in her sleep, dreaming of flowers and laughter and a home that no one could take away again. Lydia leaned her head against Elliot's shoulder, watching the horizon turn silver under the moon. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was running. She felt like she had finally arrived. And beneath the starlight, in the quiet hum of night, the past no longer felt like a chain. It felt like a story, one that had led her exactly where she was meant to be. If you've ever lost everything and had to start again, what kept you going? Do you believe that sometimes losing everything is how we finally find home? Share in the comments about what you think.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you loved this story, you will definitely love the next one. It's more intriguing than you can ever imagine. So go ahead and watch it now. Click on the image on your screen right away to watch the next one. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It helps and encourages us to share the best human interest stories you'd love.